one? I tried it.
Yeah, I know. Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today we've got a Sig Sauer P320 chambered in 45 ACP. If you've seen some of our other videos, you may have seen a P320 on our channel before, but that one was chambered in 9mm. Sig Sauer just recently released the 45 ACP. So we'll pick this thing up and start with showing you that it is unloaded. This pistol, like the other in the P320 series, has interchangeable frames and slides. The only difference is that within the 45 you can only interchange other 45 parts. The 9, the 357, and the 40 you can interchange freely among the various components. But Sig Sauer was not able to figure out some technical challenges associated with interchangeability with the 45. So it's interchangeability with the 45 only. It comes in a number of frame sizes from subcompact all the way up to full size. This particular one happens to be the compact, and it is the compact small. You can see on the frame itself there'll be a lettering compact small in 45 auto. You can also get a compact medium and a compact large. What that denotes is the thickness of the grip. The small, medium, and large is the thickness of the grip. That's one of the big things about this particular gun. The firearm itself is actually a chassis in here that I'll show you when I take it apart. That's the serialized component. The frame you see here, this plastic frame, unlike a lot of the other guns, is not the serialized component and can be interchanged. And of course the slide and barrel. So a few of the things about this that Sig wants everybody to look at is it does have interchangeable sights. They're dovetailed. And it is available with the Sig Light night sights. This particular one is just the standard sights. The Sig Light night sights are decent during the day and very good at night. It is a drop-safe weapon, and it does have a firing pin block or striker block like many of the other polymer pistols. However, it doesn't come with the split trigger by default. Now, Sig has recognized that some of the various states have requirements for things like that, and you can order it optionally with the split trigger, like a Glock. You can also order it with a magazine disconnect. But the default for this is no split trigger, no magazine disconnect. It does have a Picatinny rail on the front, so you can lights, lasers, and whatever else you might want to do. And it's got pretty much what you might consider the classic Sig profile, with a somewhat blocky looking slide and an extended beaver tail. So when you get up there, you've got a nice, good solid grip on it and quite a bit of protection from slide bite. You would really have to try to get slide bit by this gun to get bitten by it. It does have an ambidextrous slide release. It's available on both sides. And it has no external safeties. Now the takedown lever, his only function is for takedown, and I'll show you in a few minutes how that works. So let me go ahead and take it apart and show you the internals on it. There's a few things you need to know to take it down. On the Sigs, you don't have to pull the trigger unlike some of the others, but you do have to remove the magazine before starting the process. It will not let you turn the takedown lever if the magazine's in it. And then you lock the slide back. Now at this point, all you really need to do is flip the takedown lever down. I have found on this particular one, if the guide rod has moved at all, it sometimes kind of wants to hang up on the takedown lever. I find if I set it down on the table instead of holding it up in my hand, it's more easily flipped down, and if the guide rod's in the way, it's more likely to just push out of the way. Once you've got that all the way down, the slide is now under tension, of course, so hold on to the slide, release the slide lock, and it slides right apart. So it's actually quite easy to take apart. On the frame part of it, you have this mechanism in here, this little chassis that I was talking about. This is actually the trigger group, and this is what's actually considered to be the firearm. And if you had bought another frame and you wanted to interchange it, you would just pull this out, which I'll show you how to do. It's actually very easy. You pull this out, slide it into the other frame, and you can buy the frames, you know, mail order over the counter without an FFL because they're not considered the firearm. So to do that, once you've got it taken apart, you just push here to push the takedown pin out. You can do it with your finger. Anything that gets it out a little bit, grab it, pull it the way out. And then you just pull this frame. It's kind of like you go up and out, kind of up, wiggle and out. So there's a little bit of wiggling around you do. But you pull it out, there's your actual firearm. Now I had mentioned when I was talking about this earlier that you can't interchange the trigger group, the firearm from a .45 with other calibers. And one of the reasons is, right up in here, there are some differences in this architecture where things protrude and stick out that's different between the .45 and the one from the other calibers. So if nothing else, even if you were able to get it to mount into the frame, you wouldn't be able to install the magazines. So Sig did do that on purpose because they weren't able to overcome whatever challenge was associated with including .45 in that caliber mix. You can also find that it's actually relatively easy to clean this by pulling it out. Getting into the trigger group and stuff like that's a lot easier when you don't have the frame in the way. When you're done, and you just got a little hollow frame here, you just stick it back in. Now the easiest way to put it back in is to put the trigger in first. If you don't put the trigger in first and you get the back in, then you won't be able to rock it enough to put the trigger in. Drop it down in and push it in place. Now one thing, and I didn't do it this time when I was messing with it, if you're trying to pull it out, sometimes you may have a habit of wanting to catch the slide release and pick that up or pull up on it when you're pulling it out. And if you do that, it releases the takedown mechanism. And if that happens, you'll find it difficult to put the pin in. But if you look at the pin, there's a flat spot on it. And what you would do is you would turn that flat spot towards the back of the gun and use that as a ramp to reset the takedown lever that's inside if you happen to make that mistake. So if you do that and you have difficulty getting the pin back in, it's not game over, you just have to reset that. If you don't make that mistake, you just simply push the pin back in the non-taken down position, push it back in, and then rotate it down. And it's that easy to move it from one frame to the other. Now let me show you the slide and barrel assembly. There's the slide and barrel assembly. It's very similar to other striker-fired guns that you may have seen. One of the things you will see is that the striker block's a little different on this. Most of them you see, like the Glocks and the Springfields, they've got a plunger, up here or back here. This one has a little arm that's right here that gets actuated by part of the trigger mechanism that disengages the striker block. But it is a drop-safe weapon. And then, of course, to remove the barrel, you pop out the captive dual recoil spring, and then pull out the barrel. And it's got a fairly standard striker barrel. Very standard profile, nothing really particularly special about it. It does appear to be well constructed, it's well machined, very smooth, but nothing unique about it. Nice wide feed ramp. Now reassembly is fairly easy. Drop the barrel back in place. And we did have an interesting thing with the instructions on this. It came with a little card in the instructions with a dire warning about making sure that you lined these two dots up and down and lined up the flat spots on this piece side to side, or it could jam and have to be taken back to Sig. But the interesting thing is there's no flat spots on this piece. It's perfectly round. And they didn't mention flat spots on the front, which might be a little bit hard with contrast to show it on the camera. There, I can tilt it a little bit and you can see it is flatted on the front, which their instructions didn't mention. So I'm not really sure if they've done an engineering change and that warning is no longer necessary. But when I put this back together, just to play it safe, I will line it with the dots lining straight up and down. Drop it in place and make sure it's centered. But the instructions versus what I saw in reality in my hand really just didn't line up. Once you've reassembled it, putting it back on the frame is exceptionally easy. Line up the guides, lock it back, release the takedown, release the slide. You're back in business. Now, let me show you the trigger on this. One of the things on this gun you're going to find is that it's got an excellent trigger. And I don't know if it was just a case of differences in machining of the particular ones that were available. I don't have the 9mm that I had borrowed anymore to compare to, but when I was in the store I was comparing this to a 40 and a 9 that they had, and the trigger on this one was far superior to the other two. It's very smooth and light with a very crisp, defined break. And the other triggers were exceptionally nice, but compared to this one there was a difference. And I've seen the same thing with Glocks. Allegedly all Glock triggers are the same, but what I found with Glocks is their large frame guns, the 45s, which are their bigger frames, tend to have a slightly nicer trigger than their standard frame guns. So it may have something to do with the length of the arms and the angles involved, the physics of it. But let me show you this trigger. And I know we just took it apart, but we'll do the unloaded thing. There's minimal take-up, and once you're off the take-up, it's a very, very short break. When I first pulled the trigger on this, the thought that came to mind was a single-action revolver. The trigger is that short and that nice on it. If I cycle it, there's the reset, and that same very short, crisp break. And you'll find that it's a very defined wall. So as I come back on the take-up, there's a very defined wall. Cycle it, it'll work better that way. As I come off the take-up, there's a very defined wall. And then just a very smooth, no creep, no grit, smooth break. Wonderful trigger on this. The trigger is actually the thing that made me pick this particular one over the other ones that were available there, because it was just so smooth and so nice. Some comparisons, when you talk about size and different things like that, Sig considers this a compact. And a lot of people that might be looking for guns are trying to figure out, should I go 9, 40, 45, which is best? And the whole argument about which caliber is best is, could be another video in and of itself. But let me show you a comparison from a size perspective. That's one of the things that factors in, especially if you're looking at carry. So I'm going to put an empty magazine in it. Now this is a VP9, and we've got a video on this. Now this is a 9mm, so we're not trying to compare calibers, but this is considered to be a standard gun. This is just a standard size. It's not a subcompact or a compact, it's just a standard size. And you would figure that a standard size would be significantly larger than a subcompact. But when you actually compare them, and I just put them side by side, the slide does appear to be significantly shorter on the Sig than on the VP9, but when you can bring the beaver tail into play, the difference is within 1/8 of an inch. And you're going to find the same thing when you compare it to something like this XGM, which Springfield considers to be a compact. It's a 3.8-inch barrel compact. This is a 3.9-inch barrel. You're going to find that they're roughly the same size. Again, the Sig has a shorter slide, but when you factor in the beaver tail, you end up being roughly equal. So when you do move into the 45 territory, you are going to end up with the gun being slightly bigger than the same category of gun in 9 or 40. And just for one other comparison a gun that you might see, and this is a Glock 30. Now Glock calls this a subcompact. And when you compare the two, the Glock subcompact is shorter. Its slide is roughly the size of the Sig slide, and it doesn't have the beaver tail, of course. So when you get into what you would consider a subcompact, which if you get the Sig subcompact, it would be fairly close to the size of the Glock. So 45 is an excellent caliber, but you are going to end up with a slightly larger gun, and you're also going to end up with a capacity difference. All three of the 45s that I show you have a 9 in the magazine, 1 in the pipe. That VP9 that I showed you is 15 in the magazine, 1 in the pipe. So when you move up to 45, you've got a slightly more powerful cartridge, but you're going to get less of them in there. Overall, this gun was a pleasure to shoot. It worked excellent at the range. Took it out of the box, of course, cleaned and oiled it, and it ran flawlessly. The only problem we had was one issue with it, which did turn out to be a defective round. We were using Winchester white box, and it turned out to be a defective round. Other than that, it just went flawlessly. Comes in the box with 2 magazines, and it does not come with a holster, which many of the P320s come with a holster. The 9 and 40 and 357 do come with a Sig Kydex holster. And I've heard others say that they all come with holsters. The FFL had 2 of these compacts in stock. Neither one of these had the holster. But the 940s and 357s that they had did have the holsters. So it's one thing to consider. Sig does do a bunch of different packaging and bundling of their models. So if you're expecting the holster with the 45, at least in the compact, you may not get it. And the holster is just a simple paddle Kydex holster. And from a price perspective, this is slightly less expensive than the XDM and right around the same price as the Glock. So it's unlike a lot of the SIGs, which you get into the $1,000+ territory. This is $500 to $600 and is competitive with the other polymer pistols in this territory. It would be an excellent choice. It's a pleasure at the range. It'd be an excellent home defense weapon. And the compact could be carried, but if you were looking at carry, you may also want to consider moving down to the subcompact, which takes a little length off the barrel and grip. The length on this one is 7.2 inches, and the height is 5.3 inches. The slide is 1.26 inches when you consider the takedown lever. When you consider just the slide and frame without the protruding levers, it's 1.09. So this takedown lever does add quite a bit of thickness to the overall package, which matters when you're having to put it into a holster that's fitting, for example, inside your waistband. If you like our videos, give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe. Have a great day. Thank you.
I mean, does that look like a...
Yeah.
What? I just kicked. Where'd that one go?
It was just